here's the story you asked for. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The battlefield stank of ozone and scorched stone. The dragon lay broken. Its silver scales split open where plasma had seared through. Each ragged breath rattled like thunder, smoke rising from its nostrils as its wings twitched helplessly against the cracked earth. All around, the alien war machines closed in, towering frames of steel and living circuitry, shaped like mantises and bristling with weapons, their red optics fixed on the dying beast. They wanted the kill, not for victory, but for spectacle. And in front of the dragon, standing barely taller than its collapsed head, was a human. Not a soldier, not one of the armored titans humanity sometimes unleashed in war. Just a thin, awkward man with bad posture and no weapon but a dented shovel he had picked up when everything else was gone. The mantis machines paused, their comm links chittering. To them, it was amusing, the weakest of prey, shielding the most fearsome of predators. The human planted his feet anyway. Not one step closer, his voice cracked, but it carried. The machines advanced. He didn't run, didn't even raise the shovel. Instead, he bent down, pressing his forehead gently against the dragon's bloody scales. His words were soft, but the dragon's great ear turned. They think you're finished, but I've seen your kind fight before. You're not done, not until the last ember fades. Something stirred behind the dragon's molten eyes. The human stood again, turning to face the encroaching alien swarm. So come on, then, step through me if you want her, but I warn you, humanity's smallest has always been the most dangerous cornered thing in the room. For a moment, silence, then the mantis warriors laughed, a metallic, static buzz. They lunged. The human didn't move. The dragon did. With a roar that shook the ground, her chest blazed alive. The human's defiance had sparked something ancient. Fire erupted, not chemical, not plasma, but a fusion breath older than stars. It carved through the enemy ranks like molten lightning, turning chittering predators into slagged husks. When the smoke cleared, the human still stood there, shovel at his side, the dragon's massive head resting behind him like a mountain at peace. She spoke into his mind, voice deep as a fault line shifting. Of all your kind's weapons, little one, courage remains the sharpest. And so the tale spread, how a dying dragon rose again because the weakest human refused to bow. Would you like me to expand this into a longer HFY chapter-style story with more background on the war, the aliens, and the bond between the human and dragon? Got it, here's the continuation of the story, picking up right after the battlefield moment. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, Part 2. The dragon's flames died down, leaving the battlefield scarred and silent. Smoke curled into the sky where alien war machines once stood, their twisted frames cooling in the ash. The human, Elias, let out a shaky breath. His knees trembled, but he stayed upright, shovel still clutched in white-knuckled hands. He had no armor, no training, and no reason he should still be alive, but he was. The dragon shifted, massive scales grinding against the earth. Wounded, yes, but not broken anymore. Her molten gaze studied him with something Elias couldn't name. Gratitude? Respect? Something older? You should have run, she rumbled in his mind. The smallest flame is easily snuffed. He shook his head. Maybe, but sometimes the smallest flame lights the torch that burns down empires. Her golden eyes narrowed, and for a moment Elias feared she might laugh at him. But she didn't. Instead, the dragon lowered her head until her horned brow rested against the ground near his feet. A bow, ancient and unthinkable. Behind them, the survivors of his colony, fragile, weaponless humans, emerged from their hiding places. They had seen what happened, and so had the enemy. High above, orbiting warships adjusted their trajectories. The alien command had not expected resistance like this, not from dragons, and certainly not from humans. Their scanners had recorded everything, the moment one frail man's defiance turned a dying beast into a weapon of gods. Elias looked up at the sky and felt the weight of it. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The dragon's voice entered his mind again. I owe you a life debt, human, but more than that, I owe your kind an answer. You fight as if you are already kings of the stars. Perhaps it is time the galaxy remembered why. The survivors gathered behind Elias, uncertain but no longer afraid. For the first time since the invasion began, they saw hope. And in that moment, on a broken plain, beside a bleeding dragon, armed with nothing but a battered shovel, Elias realized something terrifying. The aliens hadn't just made an enemy of humanity. They had just created a legend. Want me to carry this forward into a part 3 where Elias and the dragon begin to turn the tide of the wider war, perhaps showing how their bond becomes the cornerstone of a new human-dragon alliance? Perfect, let's push this forward into part 3, where Elias and the dragon's act begins to ripple outward. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, part 3. The next night, the survivors lit no fires. They sat close to the dragon's body, her great wings sheltering them from the cold winds of the broken plain. Elias sat awake, shovel across his lap, staring up at the sky where enemy warships glittered like crimson stars. The dragon dozed fitfully, her wounds still raw. Every time she winced, the humans winced with her, as though bound by some invisible thread. Elias hadn't meant to become the thread. He had only stood where no one else would. But standing had consequences. Before dawn, a ripple of light spread across the horizon. Not sunrise drop pods. Hundreds. The aliens were coming again, this time prepared. The colony panicked. Some screamed, others prayed, but Elias stood again. His legs still shook, his arms still weak, but his voice carried clear. They're coming for her, for us. We can't outrun them, but maybe we don't have to. The dragon stirred, lifting her massive head, her golden eyes locked onto his. You are not soldiers, you are dust compared to their armies. Dust in the right place, Elias said, can choke even a giant. The dragon's chest rumbled, not with laughter but with something older, something approving. She opened one wing, exposing the unbroken curve of her scales. Then climb, little ember. If I fall again, I will not rise without you. Elias climbed. When the aliens landed, they expected a dying beast and scattered refugees. Instead, they saw a dragon rise into the sky, wings tearing the air apart, fire roaring from her maw. Upon her back, a single human stood braced, shovel gleaming like a banner in the dawn. The alien ranks faltered, not because of fire, they had faced fire, not because of dragons, they had slain dragons, but because of the human, because in their long history of conquest, no species had ever stood upon a dragon's back and called it ally. The survivors followed, rallying behind the sight. Spears, blades, even broken farming tools, they charged with courage that no war machine could measure. The aliens came expecting victory. What they met was the birth of rebellion. And in every recording, in every alien log that survived that day, one image remained. A dragon, reborn in fire. And upon her back, the weakest human standing tall. Would you like me to keep going into a part 4 where Elias and the dragon begin striking back against the alien fleet itself, maybe even taking the fight into orbit? Alright, let's take this into part 4, where Elias and the dragon carry the fight beyond the ground and the legend truly begins to spread. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, part 4. The battlefield was no longer a graveyard, it was a forge. Every clash with the alien invaders hammered Elias and the dragon into something sharper. Her wounds closed faster than any medic could explain, fire rekindled by a strange bond neither fully understood. Each time Elias shouted defiance, her flames burned hotter. Each time she faltered, his stubborn will pushed her skyward again. It was not rider and mount, it was a partnership. By the 7th day, alien dropships no longer descended in neat formations. They came in swarms, desperate, trying to drown the dragon in sheer numbers. But for every machine that rose, fire answered. For every hunter that targeted the dragon, Elias's shovel cracked a cockpit, or his voice cut through fear like steel. Word spread across human colonies. Whispers grew. The weakest stood tall. The dragon lives. Fight, and you won't fight alone. And across alien channels, panic spread. The dragon has bonded. Human defiance fuels it. This war is not the same. By the 14th day, the rebellion was no longer confined to one world. Human resistance cells in other systems lit their own flames, emboldened by stories of a man who defied war machines with nothing but a shovel and the will to stand unbroken. But the aliens were not idle. Their fleet shifted in orbit. warships blotting out the stars. For the first time, the invaders deployed a planetary lance, an orbital weapon meant to erase cities in a single strike. Its charge built in the sky, visible even from the ground, a lance of light aimed at the dragon herself. The survivors despaired. Some begged Elias to flee, to save himself. Even the dragon's voice faltered in his mind. This is not a weapon we can withstand. Not even I can shield you from it. Elias tightened his grip on the battered shovel. His hands were blistered, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his eyes burned steady. Then we don't withstand it. We stop it. The dragon turned her head, staring at him. That is madness. Maybe, Elias said, climbing back onto her scarred back. But humanity's survived this long because we specialize in madness. The dragon spread her wings, fire already kindling in her chest, and together, man and dragon, they rose toward the heavens. The orbital lance fired. The dragon roared. And the galaxy held its breath. Would you like me to continue part 5 with the battle in orbit, where Elias and the dragon attempt the impossible, turning a weapon meant to destroy worlds back upon the invaders themselves? Excellent, now we're at the point where Elias and the dragon take the fight into space itself. Here's part 5. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, part 5. The sky split open. The orbital lance screamed down like a sun torn loose, a column of annihilation meant to erase all trace of rebellion. The earth quaked as it cut through the atmosphere, burning the air into glass. But instead of fleeing, the dragon climbed. Her wings tore the heavens, every beat defying the gravity that bound lesser creatures. On her back, Elias leaned low against her neck, the shovel strapped across his spine like a soldier's sword. We will not outrun it, the dragon warned. Then we make it miss, Elias said, or we make it ours. Her molten eyes widened at his madness, but she tilted her wings and surged higher, spiraling toward the descending light. The lance struck, and the dragon met it head-on. The impact was like two stars colliding. Fire and light consumed the sky. The colonists below shielded their eyes, certain both man and dragon had been vaporized. But when the brilliance faded, a miracle lingered. The dragon hovered, scales glowing white-hot, lines of molten fire tracing along her body where the lance had struck. Instead of death, she carried its fury within her chest. Her roar shattered clouds as she bent the energy, channeling it into her ancient breath. A beam of impossible fire erupted upward, not down, but back into orbit. Alien warships scattered, too slow to escape. The nearest dreadnought caught the full force, its shields shattered, its hull ruptured, and in a single blinding instant, a vessel capable of erasing continents died to a dragon's roar. Silence fell across the battlefield. In orbit, alien commanders shrieked. On the ground, human survivors wept, and on the dragon's back, Elias threw his head back and laughed, the sound ragged, almost broken, but fierce. They're not gods, he shouted to the sky. They can bleed. The message spread across every channel, every human ear, every alien sensor. Not only had the weakest human stood tall, he had turned the galaxy's deadliest weapon into fire for his dragon. And that night, when the survivors gathered, they no longer whispered, they shouted, they sang. The rebellion had a symbol now, one the enemy could never erase. A dragon reborn in fire. And a human too stubborn to kneel. Would you like me to carry this into a part 6, where the rebellion spreads beyond the colony, showing how other human worlds and even non-human species begin to rally behind Elias and the dragon as a symbol of resistance? Here we go, now the rebellion spreads beyond one world. Here's part 6. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, part 6. The galaxy was watching. Every alien sensor that had tracked the orbital strike also recorded what came after. The footage spread like wildfire across occupied human worlds, a dragon glowing with the fire of a stolen lance, a lone man standing unbowed upon her back, laughing in the face of annihilation. What began as whispers became open defiance. What began as a colony became a movement. On the mining world of Tarsus, slaves shattered their chains, rallying with makeshift weapons and chanting the name Elias. On far-off Astra 7, resistance fighters painted dragon wings on their armor, marching into battle with the cry, "We are fire." And it wasn't just humans. Other species, long crushed under alien conquest, saw the recordings too. Some had believed humans reckless, too fragile to survive against predators older and stronger. But now they saw something else, a truth they had forgotten. The smallest, weakest flame could ignite a blaze. In orbit, the invaders scrambled. The loss of a dreadnought was not just a defeat, it was humiliation. Their commanders argued. Some demanded an immediate purge of the colony with planet-killer bombs. Others warned that such an act would make martyrs of both dragon and man. Fear had crept into their councils, a poison they had never known. On the ground, the dragon healed. Her scales still bore the scars of the lance, glowing faintly like veins of fire. She spoke less now, but when she did, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "Your kind was not made to crawl," she told Elias one night, her head resting beside the camp where survivors huddled. "You were made to burn, to rise. I see now why your enemies fear you." Elias stared at his calloused hands, the battered shovel across his knees. He had never asked for this. He was no soldier, no hero. But somehow, his refusal to kneel had become a war cry for a galaxy. And war was coming. Scouts reported movement. The aliens were gathering a fleet larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Not just to crush the dragon, but to crush the idea of her. To prove that one human's courage was nothing against the weight of an empire. Elias stood before his people, no longer refugees, but rebels. His voice was rough, tired, but steady. "They're bringing everything they've got. Good. Let them. Because every ship they send here is a ship they can't send anywhere else. Every weapon they point at us is proof that they're afraid. And when we burn them from the sky, the whole galaxy will know." He raised the shovel high, its dented edge catching firelight like a banner. "That humanity never kneels." The dragon lifted her head and roared, flame rolling across the night sky like dawn breaking early. And across stars and systems, others heard the echo. The rebellion had a name now. They called it the Fireborn War. Would you like me to take Part 7 into the galactic stage, where Elias and the dragon lead not just humans, but an alliance of species, into their first real space battle against the Empire's Grand Fleet? Here it comes, the stage shifts to the stars. Here's Part 7. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall. Part 7. The Fireborn War had begun. The aliens assembled their grand fleet in orbit, carriers the size of cities, cruisers lined with plasma lances, escorts like swarms of metal insects. Their banners of conquest had flown unchallenged for centuries. No empire had ever matched their discipline, their numbers, their technology. Until now. The humans had no fleet, at least, not in the way empires counted one. What they had were scattered civilian craft, stolen patrol cutters, rusting freighters converted into gunboats, pilots with more bravery than fuel, more rage than armor, and above them all, circling like a comet of living fire, the dragon. Upon her back, Elias strapped himself in with nothing but scavenged belts and stubbornness, shovel at his side like a general's blade. Across encrypted comms, voices spoke, not only human voices, but others, the reptilian Tharn, the winged Kalari, even the insectoid Veshrik. Species long broken under alien rule now stirred, emboldened by the sight of fire reborn. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire faced not scattered rebellions, but a coalition. The alien Grand Fleet descended, their commander broadcasting on all channels. "Lay down your arms, surrender the beast. The man will be executed swiftly. Resistance ends now." Elias laughed, a hoarse, defiant sound. He leaned into his calm mic. "Swift execution? You've been trying for weeks, and I'm still here. Tell me, when your machines sleep, do they dream of shovels?" The reply came in silence. Then, weapons charged. The battle began. Alien dreadnoughts unleashed storms of plasma, carving space into ribbons of fire. Human ships darted and weaved, too small and reckless for the Empire's precision. For every freighter torn apart, another rammed headlong into an enemy cruiser, spilling fire from within. The Kalari harried from above, wings scattering chaff clouds. The Tharn launched boarding strikes with claws and teeth. And through it all, the dragon soared. Her wings beat not against air, but the void itself, shimmering with energy stolen from the lance. She moved like no ship could, curving through the fleet with impossible grace. Fire spilled from her jaws, searing hulls, shattering escorts, igniting fuel lines in blossoms of light. On her back, Elias pointed the shovel like a commander's sword, shouting directions the dragon somehow obeyed. His voice cut through the calm net, rallying ships every time despair threatened. Hold the line. Make them bleed for every star. Humanity never kneels. The grand fleet faltered. Not broken, not yet, but shaken. They had expected a slaughter. Instead, they found themselves fighting legends. And legends, they remembered too late, could not be killed by numbers. At the battle's height, the dragon dove straight toward the flagship, its superweapon charged, a beam meant to erase the rebellion in one strike. Elias tightened his grip on the shovel, fire reflecting in his eyes. Let's end their war, partner. The dragon roared, her chest glowing brighter than the sun. And together, they plunged headfirst into the heart of the Empire's pride. Would you like me to make Part 8 the climax of this first arc, where Elias and the dragon attempt to destroy the flagship, possibly at a terrible cost? Here's the climax you've been waiting for, Part 8. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, Part 8. The alien flagship filled the stars, a city of steel and firepower. It blotted out constellations with its armored bulk. Its superweapon pulsed at the core, charging with a glow like a newborn star. The Empire had built it to end wars, to remind conquered worlds that resistance was impossible. Now Elias and the dragon raced toward it. Enemy interceptors swarmed, thousands of darting blades, plasma lances speared the void. The rebel flotilla was breaking apart behind them, scattered and burning, but still fighting, buying the dragon seconds she should not have had. On her back, Elias gritted his teeth as G-forces crushed his body. His hands bled from the straps he clung to, his throat raw from shouting into the calms, but his eyes were steady. Closer, he rasped. This path leads to death, the dragon growled in his mind. Her scales glowed, cracked from the heat of battle. Even my fire cannot pierce that core. Not fire, Elias said, not yours alone, ours. She faltered for only a heartbeat. Then, wings spread wide, she hurled herself into the storm. Interceptors exploded in waves of heat as she plowed through them. Shields shattered against her claws. Plasma strikes that would have vaporized ships only scarred her scales. She carried death on her wings, and behind her came the hopes of 100 worlds. At last, they reached the flagship's heart. The superweapon's maw opened, vast as a canyon, gathering its final charge. The dragon inhaled. Elias raised the battered shovel like a holy relic, and together, they unleashed. Her roar became a sun. Fire and landslide fused into a torrent that tore through the weapon's core. Circuits screamed, armor peeled away. The flagship convulsed like a dying beast. But the blast was too great. Energy backlashed, erupting in a chain of detonations. The dragon shrieked as the fire washed over her, wings buckling. Elias was nearly torn free, straps snapping, the void clawing at him. He looked down, saw the galaxy's greatest weapon crumbling, saw fleets scattering in terror. This was the moment. The Empire's heart would break here, but only if they struck deep enough. He pressed his forehead to the dragon's scales, whispering through bloodied lips. Just one more flight, for all of us. She roared agreement, and with her last strength, the dragon plunged into the core. Light consumed everything. The flagship imploded, a sun collapsing in on itself. The shockwave rippled across the stars, tearing enemy formations apart, hurling ships into chaos. Silence followed. When sensors cleared, the flagship was gone. The Empire's greatest fleet was in ruin. The rebellion had survived. But there was no sign of the dragon. No sign of Elias. Only a streak of fire lingering in the void, like the afterimage of wings. Would you like me to continue into a Part 9, The Aftermath, where the galaxy reacts, rebels rising everywhere, enemies fracturing, and whispers spreading that Elias and the dragon might still live? Here's Part 9, The Aftermath, carrying the story forward after the destruction of the Empire's flagship. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall, Part 9. The galaxy awoke to silence. The Empire's grand fleet, once the unbreakable fist of conquest, was shattered. The flagship, the symbol of their dominion, gone in a blaze that burned across every sensor, every transmission, every frightened alien's eyes. Rebel ships drifted among the wreckage, battered but alive. Some cheered, some wept, some simply stared at the ruins in disbelief. But all of them asked the same question. Where is the dragon? Where is the human? No answer came. Scouts combed the debris field for days. They found twisted armor, shattered hulls, drifting corpses of alien war machines, but no trace of the great beast, no trace of the stubborn man with the shovel. And yet, hope refused to die. On Tarsus, freed miners painted murals of fire streaking through the void, Elias's silhouette atop it. On Astra 7, rebels forged crude steel shovels, carrying them into battle as a sacred sign. Among the Tharn, hatchlings were named Eliar, a word that meant both ember and defiance. Even the insectoid Veshrik whispered of the dragon bond, believing the two had transcended death itself. The Empire tried to smother the story. They broadcast their own truth: the man and beast are dead, resistance is futile, order will be restored. But no one listened. Because in the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. A patrol fleet vanished near the gas giant of Morith. Its wreckage burned in patterns no plasma weapon could explain. Colonists on distant Kalari Prime swore they saw a shadow cross the stars, vast wings outlined in fire. And on rebel comm channels, a broken, static-choked transmission crackled to life for just a few seconds. Humanity never kneels. The message spread like wildfire. Were Elias and the dragon dead? Or had they become something more, a flame that could never be extinguished? The Empire, for the first time in living memory, was afraid. The rebels, for the first time in living memory, were united. And somewhere, in the endless dark, a dragon's molten eye flickered open. Would you like me to carry this into a Part 10, The Return, where Elias and the dragon reappear, changed by what they survived inside the flagship's core, and take the rebellion into its final, galaxy-shaping phase? Here's Part 10, The Return, the moment when legend proves itself real. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall. Part 10. The Empire staggered. Worlds it had crushed for centuries now rose in rebellion. Garrisons that once demanded tribute were overrun by mobs armed with nothing but fire and fury. Whole fleets deserted, captains unwilling to face the phantom of the dragon. Still, the Empire's rulers clung to power. They declared victory in every broadcast, insisting the rebellion was fractured, that the man and beast were gone. But rumors grew louder. Rebel scouts found scorch marks across empty moons, patterns shaped like wings. Alien patrols reported hearing a roar in the void, vibrations echoing through their hulls until crews abandoned ship in terror. And then, one night, the galaxy saw. A desperate rebel outpost on the edge of the Kalari Rim came under siege. The Empire deployed a carrier group, determined to make an example of the colony. Their weapons blotted out the sky, their bombardment tearing into defenses. The outpost cried for help. None could come. Until the stars themselves caught fire. A shape tore through the void, vast and blazing, wings unfurled across the heavens. Fire, brighter than plasma, brighter than suns, rained upon the invaders. Alien ships turned, shields flaring, but their firepower meant nothing. One by one, they burned. And upon the dragon's back, silhouetted against the inferno, stood a human. Not dead, not broken. Returned. The rebel comms exploded. Cries, laughter, sobs, no words carried enough weight. Except one. He's back. Elias raised his battered shovel, scarred now by battles beyond counting, and his voice thundered across every channel. Humanity never kneels, and neither will you. Rise, all of you. The Fireborn War begins today. The dragon roared beside him, her voice shaking the void. Not merely beast, not merely legend, something greater now. A force reborn in fire and defiance. The outpost was saved, the Empire's carrier group annihilated, and across 1,000 stars, the sight of their return reignited the galaxy's heart. The weakest human had not just stood tall. He had returned taller than ever. Would you like Part 11 to show how Elias and the dragon lead the Fireborn Alliance, humans and alien species together, into a final campaign to topple the Empire? Here we go, the war enters its last, galaxy-shaking phase. Here's Part 11, the Fireborn Alliance. When the dragon was about to die, The weakest human stood tall, Part 11. The return of Elias and the dragon was no longer rumor. It was undeniable. And with it, the galaxy changed. Species that had once kept their heads bowed now raised them. The Kalari forged fleets from hollowed mountains. The Tharn, long enslaved as shock troops, turned their claws against their former masters. Even the Veshrik swarms, who had survived centuries of exploitation, abandoned their hive barracks to march beneath a new banner. They called themselves the Fireborn Alliance. And at its heart was a man with a battered shovel and a dragon with wings that blazed like dawn. The Empire laughed at first. They had crushed coalitions before, scattered alliances with a single strike. But this was different. These weren't factions stitched together by treaties, they were peoples bound by legend. Every battle was fought not only with weapons but with the unyielding belief that Elias and his dragon would come. And often, they did. The two became a spearhead, striking where the Empire thought itself strongest. Fortresses fell to fire, fleets shattered against wings that glowed like suns. Each victory bred 10 more uprisings. Each uprising birthed new allies. Elias had changed too. He no longer looked like the weak farmer who once raised a shovel against impossible odds. His face was weathered, his voice carried across worlds, but his eyes, the same stubborn fire still burned there. In quiet moments, when the fighting paused, he pressed his hand against the dragon's scales and whispered, "Still with me?" "Always." Her voice rumbled back in his mind, until the last ember fades. The Empire, cornered, grew desperate. They unleashed weapons forgotten even by their own records. Stars collapsed under their fury. Worlds were burned to ash. But for every atrocity, more joined the Fireborn. Fear no longer controlled the galaxy. Rage and hope did. And at last, the Alliance gathered. 1,000 ships, from 100 worlds, all bearing the mark of fire. They formed not a fleet, but a storm, converging on the Empire's throne world, a world so fortified it had never known fear. Elias stood upon the dragon's back at the head of it all, his shovel raised like a banner. Around him, captains, warriors, and even whole species waited on his word. The weakest human, once forgotten, now commanded a galaxy. He took a breath, feeling the weight of everything, every death, every uprising, every spark of fire, and then he gave the only order that mattered. "Burn them down." The dragon roared, wings igniting with fire that spanned the stars. And the final war began. Would you like me to take Part 12 into the siege of the Empire's throne world, a massive, desperate battle where Elias and the dragon must lead the Alliance against the Empire's last fortress? Here's the next step, the final storm begins. Part 12, the siege of the throne world. When the dragon was about to die, the weakest human stood tall. Part 12. The Empire's throne world was a fortress unlike any other. It orbited a swollen red giant, wrapped in rings of steel and fire. Defense platforms circled it like thorns. Entire moons had been hollowed into gun batteries. The planet itself shimmered with a shield so vast it gleamed like a second sun. No one had ever breached it. No one had ever dared. Until now. The Fireborn Alliance surged from the void in a tide of flame and steel. Freighters converted into carriers. Alien warbeasts clad in armor. Human gunships flying wingtip to wingtip with Kalari gliders. The galaxy had thrown everything it had into this one moment. At the head of it all, the dragon. Her wings burned brighter than the red giant. Her scales scarred with battles survived. Her roar shaking the comms of every ship in the fleet. And on her back, Elias raised his battered shovel. Today, his voice thundered across the Alliance's channels. We tear down the lie that's ruled us for centuries. Today, the weakest stand tall. Today, humanity never kneels. And neither will any of you. The galaxy answered with a single, unified roar. The siege began. The Empire unleashed its wrath. Planetary cannons spat beams that sliced through the void. Fortress moons opened fire, hurling storms of plasma that vaporized rebel ships in waves. Swarms of interceptors poured out like locusts, a tide of death. The Alliance bled but did not break. The Kalari dove through shield lines, shredding defense swarms with precision. The Tharn tore into enemy cruisers with claws that pierced even hardened hull. The Veshrik unleashed storms of acid fire, melting ships into slag. And humans, fragile, furious humans, rammed their ships straight into enemy lines. laughing as they died, knowing their sacrifice would carve a path forward. Through it all, Elias and the dragon cut the sky like a living spear. Plasma fire glanced off her burning wings. Enemy aces swarmed and fell in her wake. She slammed through a fortress moon herself, claws ripping into its heart until it tore apart in a nova of molten steel. But the throne world's shield still held. The dragon circled, fire streaming from her jaws, but the barrier only rippled. Unbroken, she growled, her voice rumbling in Elias's mind. This shield is woven from a star's heart. I cannot break it. Elias stared at the planet, then down at the shovel strapped across his back. It was dented, blackened, almost falling apart, but still here, like him. We don't break it, he whispered, we go through it. The dragon's molten eyes turned toward him. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, with a low, terrible roar, she surged forward, wings blazing brighter than the star itself. Together, man and dragon hurled themselves straight at the heart of an empire. The throne world's shield flared, resisting, shrieking like a living thing. Fire met light, steel met will. And for the first time in its history, the shield cracked. Would you like me to make part 13 the decisive climax? Where Elias and the dragon breach the throne world itself and confront the empire's rulers.